Do the Dallas Cowboys need to re-sign Rico Dowdle this offseason? All that and more in this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. Welcome back. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. Follow him on Twitter at McCoolBCB. On today's show, we are answering your mailbag questions. And Landon, we've got about 15 of them wanting to know about Rico Dowdle and what does his long-term outlook look like for the Cowboys. He is a free agent in 2025. Let's just go with this question. I just like shorten to the point from JD. Would 2 years, $10 million get Rico back in Dallas next year?
Look at this. I'm a proud papa. I'm smiling. Yes, absolutely. I mean, I don't know if 2 years, $10 million is going to do it. We got, obviously that's an answer for Rico's agent, but I think that seems pretty reasonable. I maybe even kicking a little sweetener there because he's about to hit the free agent market.
Well, let me go, just to revisit this. So last year, Zach Moss got 2 years, $8 million. And actually the Cowboys thought that was too much money, which is funny. But Zach Moss was a third-round pick who produced pretty well with the Colts and Bills. I got to believe like that's your range, somewhere between $4 to $5 million a year.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on how it's structured, and I definitely think that the Cowboys, regardless of the money, should do it. Like even if it's a little bit more, but I mean, obviously they have a limit that they're willing to set. Maybe that limit's adjusted since they had such a terrible season in the running back position, and they refused to address the position properly. But either way, yes, Rico should be back, and then on top of that, the Cowboys should draft a running back. It's I think the Cowboys need to commit to the good running back that they have on their team, and then realize that no one running back should be completely doing this job by themselves. Even currently, the situation as it is now, I'm all for Rico Dowdle getting the vast majority of shares, but Zeke is so bad that like you feel like you can't really put him on the field at this point anymore, right? So. Or I mean, they are, but like it's down to like what 2 touches a game.
Yeah, I mean he's getting the amount of touches where I just don't care anymore. Like he comes in for 1 or 2 snaps and he's off the field. It's just
you can't even complain about it anymore, right?
No.
So. Yeah, I think that that's not sustainable. Like I mean, especially if you're signing him to a multi-year deal, go get another guy that gives you a dynamic element to this backfield, and then thrive. I think it's a very simple way to fix this running back solution. You should be thrilled that you have a guy like Rico that that you can potentially sign and feel good about. And then, go and try to make the room from good to great by adding a second guy who can do some different things that Rico can.
All right. So before we even get into some of the numbers and stuff, let's just kind of talk about what Rico has done this year since Mike McCarthy declared him the RB1, which is in November, which still makes me so mad. November.
When does the season start, Marcus? Is it
September? It was November 14th. Yeah, November 14th was when Mike McCarthy said, hey, we're kind of ditching this running back by committee. Rico Dowdle is averaging 99 yards per game and 5.17 yards per carry since being declared the quote-unquote starter. I'm shocked that it's taken them this long, but I'm also not, because I don't think this was necessarily Mike McCarthy's call to make Rico the only running back that's going to get the touches. But anyways, I think what he's showing you is that he is producing saying a starting running back is actually an understatement. He's producing like a top 12-ish running back in the NFL right now, Landon.
A good running back. He's a good running back. Like it's not like he can get you by. Like that's the thing that's been so embarrassing is that they've been ham-fisting Harry's to Dalvin Cook and Ezekiel Elliott for this entire early part of the season when they have had a guy who is a good running back on their team this whole time they could have been feeding. So yeah, I mean, I think, now that we've seen that what happens when you rectify that issue, we should reward him. And look, it's been tough. Like, I get it. Like, I clearly have been a Rico Dowdle fan since Jump Street, right? I mean, we've been talking about since he was an undrafted free agent. I think the issue at times has been he's had some injury stuff. It's hidden his ability. It's caused him to take a step back, and I think that stuff is still there. As far as like the injury issues that you have concerns about, I mean, you're always going to have those concerns with the running back. But I think now you've given him opportunity, and all he's done is produce with that opportunity. He's earned the right to have that opportunity again, to sign a little nice deal. And for the Cowboys, like, I mean, look, it's been one of the only positive aspects of your team this season is that you've developed a run game as the season has gone on, and the offensive line is obviously a huge part of that. But you can't deny that Rico Dowdle is head and shoulders better than every single other running back who's had a carry with the Cowboys this season.
So if you look at the running backs this year, later that have a success rate of 54% or better, and are averaging 4.5 yards per attempt, again, you're looking at like pretty attainable metrics, right? 4.5 yards a carry, 54% success rate. The only other two running backs in the league that are doing that, Derrick Henry, Saquon Barkley, two guys that are in MVP discussions right now. And Rico's producing at the same efficiency, and he's being that effective. So yeah, he's been awesome. It's just, how do you value a running back next year who has had neck injuries, who's going to be 27 years old? What kind of contract do you give him? I think 2 years, $10 million is probably right, where you can get out after a year. And to me, he's like the perfect placeholder until you draft somebody. Maybe you do the Tony Pollard thing a little bit, where the guy that you draft in the second round is a part-time player. In 2026, he's your full-time back. And that's just where we go.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just get right back on track with the kind of schedule that you had previous to this, right? Where you draft a young back, he's your secondary guy until he takes the role, and then you let go the older guy and you draft a young back, right? It's like, it's very straightforward. And I think the Cowboys kind of tried to get tricky with it a little bit. They didn't want to pay Tony Pollard. Maybe they should have thought about it. And then they just didn't do anything at the position. So yeah, I think, when Marcus said running backs don't matter, this isn't exactly what he meant. And I think that the Cowboys have learned that clearly, that they do matter. It's just you shouldn't pay them a ton of money.
But this is, you're right. Like, there's definitely a cliff where running backs, so you just get beyond replaceable. And that's Ezekiel Elliott, Dalvin Cook. And we've known that for a couple of years. That's why those guys have bounced around. But one of the reasons why we say running backs don't matter is because you can find guys like Rico Dowdle. Yeah, you could find them anywhere, right? And Rico Dowdle's producing at some of the same levels of Bijan Robinson and Breece Hall and Kenneth Walker, like guys that were drafted really, really high. He's putting up the same numbers per game. So this is why you do that. Again, I do think Dallas should try to bring him back on a small deal. But if he's asking for 7 or 8 or 9 million per year, that's when it's like, okay, we appreciate what you did this year, but we can't invest that much money into the running back position again.
But if you're going to do that, which is totally fine, the key is to actually go out and get another running back.
Exactly.
Like, that's where the Dallas got the problem, is that running backs don't matter if you keep looking, but you have to keep looking. You can't just, throw your hands up and say, "Oh, we're done. We got these guys." So,
and I don't think he's going to command the type of market that obviously Saquon or Derrick Henry did. In fact, I don't think he's going to even get anywhere close to the amount of money that like Tony Pollard did, who, was a Pro Bowl running back who had 4 years of good production. So I do think that 2 years, 10 million is I think that's on the higher end of probably what he'll get. I would expect Dallas to bring him back. Like, I think he's shown enough this year that he deserves another chance at this backfield in 2025. Yeah, I'm assuming
he's a great starting piece at the very least.
Oh,
he's a great starting piece to the running back room, and a high floor at the very, very least. If you try to pull the same shenanigans next season that you did this season, you'll be in a better spot because you'll have a better running back that you're relying on.
We should also mention the numbers that he has been posting over the last month or so It's not with Dak Prescott at quarterback. It really hasn't been with Zach Martin at guard either. It's been Brock Hoffman and TJ Bass playing. So
A
not the
rotating
most.
crew of offensive linemen. Like
I
it's
know.
you couldn't even just say one or two guys. Like it feels like everybody but Terrence Steele has been out of the lineup at a certain point and rotated in, and Rico keeps producing.
Exactly. All right, let's talk about the future of the linebacker position for the Dallas Cowboys now that we know the status of DeMarvion Overshown. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by Built. If you're a renter, listen up. This is a total game changer. Thanks to Built, you can now earn points on rent payments, just like you do with groceries or travel. Paying rent now comes with serious perks, and it's completely free to join. Earn valuable Built points on your rent and everyday spending at no extra cost. Redeem points for flights, hotel stays, and even future rent payments with over 500 airlines and 700,000 hotels in their program. The possibilities are endless. You can access unique experiences that are exclusive to Built members. Start earning points on rent that you're already paying by going to joinbuilt.com/LockedOnNFL. That is joinbuilt.com/LockedOnNFL. And make sure to use our link so they know that we sent you. Don't wait. Start earning rewards today. Welcome back. We are answering your Twitter questions here. And Lana, we've got one about the linebacker position. I think a lot of people want to know, how highly should the Cowboys prioritize linebacker in free agency and in the draft now that DeMarvion Overshown, we know, towards ACL, MCL, PCL, likely to be out for most of the 2025 season, if not all of it. What should they do now?
Yeah, linebackers, back on the menu, boys, as they say. I think it was on the menu anyways. I think, like you just have to rotate these guys. You just don't know what you're going to get from Kendricks at the end of the season, and certainly not next season. You don't know who your defense coordinator is. So if Zimmer's not back, you may not even necessarily have Kendricks on this team anymore. So, and the good news is that it does seem like linebacker is one of the positions in this draft that it does seem to go a little bit deep. Yes. So you are kind of eating at a very full trough at the very least. So the good news is that I think you can, because of that, you can put linebacker on your list of potential target positions. And I think that, just by the nature of the position and by the nature of this class, you should be able to find something in the middle rounds that can have an effect on your team, a positive effect on this team next year. I think that the problem becomes you are relying on Overshown to kind of be the catalyst at the position. Yeah. So does it prioritize, kind of reconfigure the priorities of where you would put it on your stack? Maybe now you have to start thinking about something in the second or third round if like it pops up. But the problem is obviously you've got a lot of needs that you need to fill in this class. So I do think that linebacker was already on the menu for the draft, draft need list. Yeah. But I think the difference now is that you may feel like you need to kind of go try to procure yourself a playmaker at the position because you may not have one next year with Overshown out.
Well, I think part of this also depends on like, how do the Cowboys feel about Overshown's outlook, like beyond 2025? Because if they believe he's going to make a full recovery in 2026 or by 2026, maybe you just try to piece it together for a year and maybe you re-sign Eric Kendricks. I will say free agency is one. Linebacker is a spot in free agency where you can get some value. Look at the Eagles and the Commanders this year. The Commanders signed Frankie Louvu, who has been awesome. They signed him to a cheap deal.
Maybe their best player on defense, honestly. He's
Well, and then Zach Bond for the Eagles might be their best player on defense right now. So that is a spot that you, at least historically, you can find not only high-end players, but starting caliber linebackers cheap. Cowboys are an example with Eric Kendricks.
Yeah, exactly. So I think another guy, just like success there it's about fit. I feel like, right, with the defensive coordinator. But yeah, I agree. It's a lot like running back, where if you find the right guy, you can get them cheaply, and they can have a pretty major impact without having to spend tons and tons of money at the position, just if they are a good fit and are a veteran player who knows what they're doing.
Now you are right in the sense that like you're not going to find the 235-pound linebacker that can fly sideline to sideline in free agency. Like those guys just don't come out very often, right? Um, but this draft does have them. So if you were interested already in, drafting one of these guys, and maybe the Cowboys should, maybe the goal is just to keep drafting these guys on day 2 every single year. It's not a bad strategy. I will also point to your first round pick. If you want to get a really dynamic linebacker, Jalen Walker from Georgia, who is kind of a Micah Parsons type of player. Not going to say Micah Parsons, but one of those hybrid linebackers, edge rushers. I think he's interesting as well.
Who's that Alabama safety that's starts with an M, I think is his last name. There are other guys too that I think that are you can get that can kind of give you similar sort of production that may not even be linebackers that are safeties, So
Malachi Starks from Georgia.
From Georgia, of course. Yeah. I constantly get. So Starks is another guy that's just just a two-way player, obviously can play the run and play the pass, solid coming down in the box. If you can find yourself a guy like that as well, I think really you just need another sort of playmaker in the middle of that defense to kind of hold things down while Overshown is gone.
This isn't a draft show, but I've been kind of becoming more open to the idea of drafting a safety high and trying to find somebody that can, again, drafting a safety isn't going to replace DeMarvion and Overshown, but to get another playmaker in the middle of your defense, they haven't had that at all this year. Like I know Malik Hooker had an interception last year, but it's not the same as like what you see Brian Branch doing for the Lions or Kyle Hamilton for the Ravens or Xavier McKinney for the Packers. Like they haven't had that type of safety since Jeff Heath.
Well, and oh man, it's the unicorn, I would say, right? Matt Johnson. I think what's interesting
That's
too
is that
unicorn. Yeah, that's a real unicorn. I think the thing that's the kind of the unspoken thing here about the draft in general is the change in the way the NFL is playing, right? Like the sudden sharp rise of shell coverages and the return of the run game and the return of that sort of style of ball becoming more palatable and more valuable than it had been. So I think the defensive response to that is going to be a return to more dynamic safeties that can play two ways, that can handle coming down in the box and being a run defender, and then also step back and be a pass defender. So, as we start to see the cycle of NFL offense and defense kind of turn back around to the old school mentality, as defenses play more shell coverage and you want offenses to run the ball a little bit more, you're going to start to see the kind of turning of the page and on the defensive side of the ball, as we'll probably start seeing guys get a little bit bigger. You're going to see more of these kind of two-way safeties a la Roy Williams, not that far, but more of a trend back towards those kind of guys eventually than where we've been trending previous to this.
I do want to say over the next month, there's not a lot to be excited about for the Cowboys. Like I get it. It's a lost season. A lot of your best players are injured, and we'll get to that in a second. But like, this is a really big opportunity for Leofau, right? Like,
yeah,
he's going to start. He's actually played pretty well when he's gotten some big snaps. Like, can he be somebody, again, not in the same mold of Overshown at all, but somebody that could be a building block as you go forward in the future? They did spend a 3rd round pick on him. Big chance for him.
Yeah, huge opportunity. Obviously, more, I think, taking the role of what Kendricks is doing potentially, like that. Mm-hmm. Obviously, he's not doing that now because he's having to replace Overshown. But I think in the future, you see him more maybe as a kind of a middle backer than a Will. But
that'd be okay. Like, find me another linebacker. We can figure out the other one, right?
Absolutely. I don't think it's hard to find a good Will. So it's good to see Leofau get out there and get some snaps. Obviously, it's going to be needed this down the stretch. And if we could see him kind of take a step and become more of a playmaker, I mean, he had like, I think, a sack and a half in this last game or something, or at least
sack and a half.
Yeah. So again, I think that there is lots of opportunity. So far, he has taken advantage. The Cowboys coaching staff is extremely excited about this player and has been since the draft. This is a real opportunity to kind of not only make a name for himself, but to show us that maybe there is a little bit better depth at the linebacker position than we previously thought.
And again, over the next month, those are the types of players that we're going to be interested in watching, like Brock Hoffman. Can he be the future at right guard or center if you want to move guys? Cooper Beebe probably won't play this week because of a concussion, but He looks really good. Watch some of the younger players because they're going to be the ones that help them decide in 2025 kind of where their ceiling is. Let's talk about the injuries because this has been a brutal season for injuries for the Dallas Cowboys. Is it because of the coaching staff, the training staff? We'll break it down next. This episode is brought to you by IceShakers. Hey, Locked On Cowboy fans, if you're like me, your holiday shopping list is probably not completely yet. Let's just say that. Well, if that's the case, we've got the perfect gift for the passionate sports fan in your life. Perhaps you've heard of IceShaker. IceShaker is now officially licensed with the NFL, NHL, NBA, NCAA, and MLB, and will make the ideal gift. I've got mine right here. My Dallas Cowboy one. It's amazing. Created by and used by the Gronkowski brothers, IceShakers has sold over 1 million bottles. They have changed the game with workout bottles, and this is the gift that you've been looking for. Go to IceShaker.com and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL at checkout to save 25% off your order. It's third-party tested. It will hold ice for over 30 hours. I keep it by my side all the time. Order your team branded bottles today at IceShaker.com and use the promo code LOCKEDONNFL for 25% off your order. IceShakers, show your support for your teams with the best branded workout bottles on the market. IceShakers. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, check out the new Locked On NFL show. 2 shows every single day. 1 in the morning with Tyler Rowland, 1 in the afternoon with Tony Wiggins, available wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Landon, our last question here has to deal with the Cowboys injuries, which they've certainly had their fair share of this year. The question is there a problem with the training staff? Are they using best practices to prevent injuries? It feels like the injuries are off the charts this year.
Yeah, I really struggled to blame the training staff for this. I mean, I feel like, first of all, I mean, most of the injuries we're talking about are major, injuries, not like soft tissue injuries. Yeah. And look, I think that everything that you've heard or read from not just our sources, inside the building, but outside of the building, rave about the Cowboys medical staff and training staff. So and I think, we've heard countless times McCarthy himself, as you mentioned before, talking about the GPS numbers and making sure that guys are being overworked. And frankly, I think one of the things that Mike McCarthy has done an excellent job as a head coach is managing the players so that they are healthy near the end of the season. One of the things that has made me the most upset about McCarthy getting a lion's share of some of the blame about what happened last year is that McCarthy managed to get this team all the way through the season into a playoff situation and arrive at the home playoff game against an 8 seed almost completely healthy. It's an incredible task of player management, of understanding your roster and not overworking your players. So if anything, no, I think the coaching staff and especially the training staff has done an incredible job over the years. And I think that's the important thing is that, with these injury situations, 1 year is not a good sample size. You need to go back and look at the situation for at least 5+ years worth of data to kind of get a good look at it. And if you do, I mean, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I guarantee you that a statistician would probably look at the way that things have gone these last 5 years and say the Cowboys are suffering from injury regression right now.
Yeah.
They're the luck has turned around on them. They've been pretty lucky at certain points with injury stuff, and now unfortunately they've become unlucky. So I just knowing how revered these groups are specifically in these areas and how much work and how much money they put into it and all the everything's having MRI machines on, like right next to the field. And they spend a lot of money and they have a lot of really great professionals working on these players. If it was a rash of soft tissue stuff, that would be one thing. But I'm seeing a lot of major injury stuff happening because of collisions. No medical staff.
Well, and I think also the other thing is if it was like the same players getting hurt the same ways, maybe I could consider it. But like Deron Bland has been perfectly healthy through his career. He breaks his foot in training camp. That's his only injury. CeeDee Lamb has never missed a game in the NFL. He landed on his shoulder. There's not a lot you can do about that to prevent it, right? They're giving him time off in practice to help him get healthy, and it seems like he is getting healthier. I just don't know how you can prevent Sam Williams from tearing his ACL on punt return in practice, or it's just, I think it's just a lot. It's very fluky. I can't blame the training staff. I'm sure Mike McCarthy is going to look at everything this offseason and feel like, okay, hey, maybe we could improve a little bit here. Let's try to do this and this and this to keep our team healthier. But you're right. This has been one of the healthier teams over the last 3 or 4 years. I wouldn't stress about it too much. It's just bad luck.
Yeah, and I understand the thought process where it feels like it's you're getting the lion's share of the bad luck, and it's easy to kind of turn the blame to the folks that have the most influence on the situation. But the reality is that like this is a game where increasingly stronger and increasingly faster human beings are colliding with each other at increasingly faster rates, and just injury is an unfortunate part, but an actual part of this game. And so, sometimes you luck out and you don't get a ton of it. And sometimes, you're the person that's the punching Judy for the injuries, and the hits just kind of keep coming over and over again. So,
I will also point out the Cowboys have had better depth in other years, so that when they do have injuries, it hasn't been as detrimental. But you've seen like this year, like at the defensive line, when they lost Lawrence and Parsons, they just didn't have Dorrance Armstrong and Dante Fowler behind those guys that could step up. So it looks worse than maybe what it is. And I think that's been impacting the entire roster this season.
Well, I think even further to that point, I think it's the hyper focus in certain areas. Like you
all
lost
the defensive line,
defensive ends, right? Like it looks absolutely detrimental because you have one very, very key position where you're completely wiped out at, right? So
or even corner with
yeah.
Bland missing time, Diggs has missed time, Jordan Lewis missed the game. You've had Josh Butler get hurt. I mean, Kalen Carson's got hurt. So you're right. Like a couple positions have made the injuries not look worse, but it feels worse.
Yeah, and I also think that it's not just coincidental. I mean, it is coincidental, but it feels not coincidental that it's corner, offensive line, and defensive end that seem to be the spots where these injuries are happening, right? Where you are kind of the most uncertain about what's going on because of either youth of the position or previous injuries that we're still having to deal with, like Diggs and Bland, and so I think the way that the injury the injuries fell, and that the kind of hyper localization at three different key positions made it seem worse in year. And then on top of that, your starting quarterback, right?
Yeah, that's
so I think it's like it makes you feel like that there's a larger issue than frankly it is. And if you enumerate the injuries, it may not be that much more than it was in other seasons. It's just that they're localized in positions that you are relying on.
And outside of Overshown, Dak is probably the player that I'm worried about the most in terms of like recurring injuries, because he's just had a lot of lower body injuries at this point, whether it was the broken foot in 2020, you had the calf injury in 2022. I think it was. He had the foot injury this offseason, now the hamstring injury. Like, I think maybe Dak has got to step back and try to figure out a different training regimen to make sure that he can stay healthy throughout the year. But I don't think this is a Cowboys issue necessarily either.
No, I think it's more of an issue. Just, like I said, when the injuries fall and where they're following, and it, how it feels to us at times.
Yeah. All right. That is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every single day. On tomorrow's show, we've got the crossover show with Locked On Panthers, Julian Council, talking about their kind of revived season. Now that Bryce Young is back in the starting lineup, we'll catch up with him. Go download our podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms. Follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus_Mosier, and we will see you right back here tomorrow.